Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to BMA NMWA. So, Addie, I know that we've been hearing a lot in the news lately about healing. And this is an episode that is dedicated to that idea. All right, and Addie, can you hear me? Elissa, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
You can hear me. Okay, great. So then, okay, so it seems like we're having some issues with Addie's feed. So we'll just kind of wait for her to be able to rejoin us. But in the interim, one of the things that we are excited to talk about today is kind of what it means for art to be a source of sustenance and for healing. I mean, I think that I don't even know how collectively how many times we've heard the word healing and healer in the past few days and over the weekend, and it's sort of like it's the national mandate right now. So, you know, even though it's very much in the national conversation, I think there's less clarity about what it means to heal and what a healing process can look like. So we're really excited to have Elissa Blount-Moorhead, an artist who has a work up at the BMA currently, as well as Melania Douglas, an artist and curator at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, joining us today to talk about healing as a part of their artistic and curatorial practice. So, as always, I'm Veronica Betancourt.
Hi, I'm back on. I'm Addie Gayoso from the Women's Museum. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, and if you couldn't tell, we're extremely live, as usual. And I'm delighted to introduce Elissa Blount-Moorhead. Hi, Elissa. I know that you've had a 25 plus year career that has straddled being an artist and a curator and a filmmaker and a mother and, you know, all matter of things, but always kind of with a real focus and attention to time. So I wanted to start by thanking you for taking the time to be with us today and with all of the viewers of BMA NMWA. And as always, folks, if you've got questions or comments, leave them in the chat and we'll be able to get to them at the end of the episode. So I thought that we might start by talking through Back in Song. And we've got a still here from that piece. And just for folks who haven't been to the Baltimore Museum of Art yet, one of the things that is, I mean, first, I encourage you to go if you can, because it's a really carefully designed work and also gallery space. Elissa, I know you worked really carefully with your collaborating artist, Bradford Young, to kind of create this very darkened, almost cozy cocoon-like room that has 4 screens. And this is where I try to make a gallery with my hands. So, having 2 screens kind of on the far side of the gallery facing you that are featuring archival, like edits of archival footage, and then sort of these 2 parallel or perpendicular screens almost in the middle that feature these long sort of almost reverential close-ups of different healers who either sort of look directly at the viewer or kind of look off into the distance, but you sort of feel their presence with you in the space. Elissa, does that sound like a fair and concise description of the work?
100%. It's yeah, and we also worked really, really hard with the Baltimore Museum of Art it's a very different experience than the initial piece, which was mounted in what felt more like a sanctuary. It was, that was an incredible experience with the Philadelphia Contemporary for different reasons. It was a different context, a different audience as well. It's at the site of a school and also connected to the site of early studies around gynecology that were like deeply misguided and led by patriarchy and racism. So, it was more of a juxtaposition there. Whereas here at the BMA, it's more of a singular kind of experience where we were able to work with them to create a kind of, like, I think it was a perfect description, a kind of cocooned experience that is a lot more uh, singular and small and sort of focused on the work as opposed to sort of the big sanctuary space. So, and we have the centerpiece, and it's funny because it forms a cross, and that was obviously a kind of subconscious thing that Bradford and I did because it wasn't initially what we were thinking about. Um, but what it allowed was for you to have a kind of oblique view of people that you consider healers, and then a sort of front view of this rest and euphoria, which is the sort of unspoken underpinnings of both of the archival screens. And so, in some instances, you're able to see them both at the same time. And in this new version, you're able to have two separate experiences, but the audio bleeds through the entire piece, so you still can hear no matter where you are. So.
I have to say, Elissa, I had an opportunity to actually go to the BMA to see your work. I really wanted to sort of see it in advance of talking to you today. And I want to thank you for creating it. I think that it resonated with me in this particular moment because I've been turning to female healers, non-traditional doctors, social workers, yoga and meditation practitioners via video calls over the last 8 months. So while I don't think you were thinking about this when it was being made, this sort of being faced with these healers in my space felt very familiar and very comfortable for me in that moment. And I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about the specific women featured in the work. And I also wonder, do you consider these images portraits of individuals, or do you consider them more allegories for modern healing itself?
Definitely more allegories. But of course, each one of them is imbued with a very specific kind of, power. And when we talk about them, we generally have not talked about, their names in particular, but we've talked more about, representation and not privileging the personal over the wider conversation around healing and the sort of feminine power connected to that. So, but in terms of talking about who they are, what they do in our world, it's a combination of midwives, teachers. There's a person there that is a funder who has been a long time. She didn't fund this project directly, but she's been a long time supporter of women in the arts and women of color in particular in the region, and supporting projects that may or may not have otherwise been supported. There's musicians, textile artists. There's Bradford, my co-director and partner, making partner, grew up in a funeral home. And anybody who knows anything about that work, it's definitely care work. And there's someone there that is a very well-regarded, well-loved member of a family that has several generations doing funeral work. And she in particular prepares the bodies and does the makeup and the hair and that sort of thing. And again, traditions, if that is their funeral tradition, that's a big part of it, is, sending someone home
Mhm.
in a way that they would feel comfortable, and so
Yeah.
it's a range of kinds of healers.
Yeah, and so I think one of the interesting kind of threads that I'm hearing is just how collaborative your practice is. And one of the things that you mentioned is that you didn't just want the work to be about healing, but that the process of making it should be something that was also
Mhm.
really imbued with that spirit of really taking care. And so I would love to hear more about like what did that look like? What does it mean to make art with the idea that healing is at the center of it, of the practice?
Yeah. And then I'm glad you asked that, because it's something that I talk about and think about a lot with women that I work with, or women identified people, or allies like Bradford. Um, it's kind of it for me. It's essential, and it's something that I think in many cases has been at best not highlighted as a legitimate process. Singular genius has always been thrust as forward as the most legitimate way to
Mm.
make, and most important people work that way, quote unquote important. And I think what that does is it robs us of understanding um, how women have worked and always worked. Whether that work is product based or process based, and has always been a big deal for me and for a lot of the women that I know and that I work with. And so, sorry, that's my bell. My house is a hotbed today of workers and homeschools and all sorts of things. It is what it is. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that has been a sort of patriarchal modality for diminishing process and diminishing other ways of working. It's been a way to control. It's something that has always bothered me, even before I really understood what it was. And so I think it's really important to be able to um, negate certain kinds of hierarchy, certain kinds of avenues for oppression. In film in particular, it's a very sort of hierarchical, segmented, expertise-based medium, and so you really have to rely on each other. It's collaborative, but ironically, it can also be you know there's like this hedge money that happens with when someone doesn't understand a certain element, and you really rely on people. And so our process is really about breaking that down, not being onerous, not being tied to the outcome in the same way, and hoping that
Mhm.
our collaborative process shows through in what
Mhm.
we're trying to give to people, so that the thing itself is providing healing. And we're still
Yeah.
trying to figure that out. We think about it and talk about it all the time.
Mhm.
But that was
Yeah.
huge for us, working with our, again, hierarchy dictates that directors are the most important people and editors are posts, and that they are the people who, pull it together. When anybody who's made anything knows that the editor is crucial. And Stephanie St. Paul, our editor, is an auteur, is a filmmaker, and so we consider
Yeah.
her a collaborator. Same with our
Well,
researchers as well.
and I love having this still up at the same time that you're talking about collaboration of
Mhm.
people in a dance and in a partner dance where you can't make the partner dance by yourself.
Right,
so,
right.
so I think that it really kind of captures that ethos, and also I think the possibility of joy in working together. Um, and that's
Yeah.
I think one of the things that also shines through in Back in Song, that through the archival footage there are moments of euphoria, there are moments of ecstasy, um, and things that really feel like expansive possibilities, um, which sometimes healing can be conceived of as like a matter of isolation and treatment. And I think
Mm.
especially now when we are living with a pandemic around us, and the means of taking care is so much a means of kind of being physically apart. So I think it's really sort of beautiful to think about the ways that the process by which you worked was a process of healing some of those rifts or hierarchies in cinema or in the art world, and saying like, no, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Cecilia Whiteman, our curator, again, there's a certain sort of academic expertise that people regard curators within, and it's again after a work is done and it's separated and analyzed. When in fact, again, as the installation as you see it was very much a collaborative process with Cecilia, and I think it shows
Mhm.
up. So yeah, I think like this dance piece, I love this because it's also equally weighted because I used to joke when my oldest was little that she was breastfed, and so my partner was like, well, I do all of these things because if there were tokens in the world, breastfed is like the highest tokens in mothering because it would just wear you out, right? And so we would kind of like organically shift the weight, not so much based on obvious things, but some things just take a lot, right? And in this dance, there's elements where she's flipping him like by the head,
Mm.
right? And he's flipping her, and there's like this incredible distribution of the way that you're going to try to execute this dance, and it's you could see it, some of it happening in real time, some of it choreographed, but it's also imbued with this tremendous like real time ecstasy, real time
Mm.
joy, and that's what we felt like in making it. We would, the researchers theoretically give you material and then you work with it, but they would send things and then we'd say, "Oh my God, have you read this? And have you read that?" It was like a nerd fest of images and
Yeah.
text. But it's because the people we wanted to work with are these super smart thinkers who are mining the archive in the way that we're not doing necessarily professionally on a daily basis, but we're doing it. And so why wouldn't it be a back and forth? And so the final product that you see is our conversation in two dimensions.
I really love this idea you're talking about, this sort of this collaboration that just is inherent in your work, and it makes me think too about this notion of being healed versus healing, and this idea that we, um, in our bodies and our minds, we help in the process of healing, or we can hinder that process. So we are really collaborators with healers. So I really love that sort of that
Mhm.
connection that you're making between sort of the work that's being made, but also the work, the what your work is reflecting. This idea of wanting to be that healing is a process that involves not just the sort of official healer, but the individual that is seeking healing as well.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, and I know that can you tell us a little bit? We have one more image I think you shared with us, and I'm curious about. It's part of a. You said it mentioned a PBS special.
Oh, yes, that's actually a separate project. It's incredible. American Masters has, in their own sort of self-interrogation, have started to think about that word masters and what that meant. And
Mhm.
so to that end, they created something called Masters in the Making, and they wanted to challenge the ageism, and all the other isms that show may or may not have been unintentionally supporting.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so they charged 7 filmmakers, and I'm one of them, to do a piece on another artist who may not have been an old white man, basically.
Mhm.
So there's
Mhm.
native folks, there's women, there's people of color, and this is Damon Davis, who was the subject of the piece that I did. Again, it was, I know their intention was to challenge that, but for us, again, became this collaborative representation
Mm.
of our shared values. We didn't know each other, we didn't know we were going to be paired, and it ended up being more of a conversation that is represented. This kind of passing material. I don't know how else to describe it. You know, each of us having a hand, and so what you see in this piece, I think you see our hand. It was only four of us, so we only had a DP, a sound person, myself, and the subject, and my incredible producer was there with us. But that was it. And so this is something we were able to create together.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm.
Yeah. And in that sense of thinking about collaborative creation, Elissa, I want to thank you for joining us for our first segment, and also tell viewers who got really excited about your work that we're not done talking to you, but we're going to talk to Melania Douglas at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, and then bring you both on together to have a wide-ranging conversation and also Q&A. So thanks, and we'll see you again.
Okay.
See you in a bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Our next guest today is NMWA's Director of Public Programs, Melania Douglas, and she's been exploring concepts of and contributors to healing in the upcoming participatory virtual exhibition, Reclamation, Recipes, Remedies, and Rituals. Reclamation will be live at NMWA.org beginning Sunday, November 15th. We're grateful Melani, who is the show's curator and a contributing artist, is here to provide a sneak peek of this exciting project, as well as to share how you can contribute to it. Hi, Melani.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course.
No,
Yeah.
It's great to have this image of people gathering at a table. I mean, I feel like we are attempting to gather at a digital table for our conversation.
Yeah, it is beautiful to have this project that's looking at food, healing, remedies, recipes, rituals, and getting the artist images that are coming in is touching me in ways that I, perhaps wasn't expecting. So it's been a beautiful process.
And I have to say thank you, because you're sharing with us these images and they haven't been seen by the wider public. So everyone here is getting the sneak peek of these incredible images. And just to sort of contextualize the show a little bit, the idea of reclamation, I want you to talk a little bit more about this idea of it recontextualizing the traditional role women play in providing sustenance and healing. And I'm curious, for you, as you entered into this project, how did you define healer? And then I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about healing will be examined in this particular exhibition.
I started working on Reclamation in about 2014, 2015. And it was really coming out of taking People's Institute class around racism and looking at how culture is defined and what are the semblances of culture and the ways that we heal ourselves. And one of the last things as we look at assimilation in society is that a lot of times you still have the recipes. You may lose the language, you may lose the songs, you may, lose some of the prayers, but some of the recipes are still passed down. And also some of the stories of how the recipe changes over time because of things that are happening in society, whether canning food is more available, whether people are living at a faster pace, whether people are adopting or trying to eliminate parts of their culture as they assimilate into whiteness and into society. So I was fascinated just at the underrepresented, like how we sometimes take advantage of the healing that takes place in the kitchen, and all the social movements that have happened around food and have happened around people gathering, and how many family problems have been solved around gathering and food and in the kitchen, and everybody ends up talking there. But then it also reminded me of how sometimes when we look at an art piece, we don't have a snapshot into all of the healing and restoration that artists do in their own lives and for each other. We don't always have what really goes into that art piece, the living that goes into it, the community, the family, the generations, the stories, the ancestry, the culture. And so this project and doing it at the National Museum of Women in the Arts really provided an opportunity for artists to show and see that kind of backstory, that that place that where they curate, they curate their own homes, they curate their own spaces. And that really was a philosophy that I was looking at when I developed the Family Arts Museum, that's looking at home as curated space, community as gallery, family as fine art. So looking at this space as their original art that then informs what happens in the studio, and how what we're getting is this really like fine-tuned process. We're getting like the this end of this process, and sometimes an artist will tell you they're never done, but you're getting like this last snapshot of all of these moments, like you see here with one of our artists, Sharena Christmas, and she's gathering with this very intimate group of friends that may, for some people, some of us right now in the time of COVID, there's just a few people that we're able to gather with on the regular, and to have these spaces where the masks come off, and where you're able to, still taking a risk just to love, and the risk that artists take, and that curators take, and that we all take to love, and how that ties to each other as healers.
So I want to share another image from the show. And so I'm kind of curious, like, how did you conceptualize the breadth of artists that you wanted to invite in to sort of be a part of this collaborative and really sort of responsive process?
All of the artists were given a framework. And so they had a list of shots that I was asking them to give. And so we had shots like of the kitchen table, of food ingredients, videos of you preparing the food, a video of you working at the table when the kitchen table is not being used as a kitchen table. Maybe it's your workspace, so we have this like a framework of like maybe about 20 prompts that are asking them to show us, that space. And then also really expressing the shared nature of it, that looking at everyone as artist and curator, and wanting them for me not to say to them, it has to look like this. Everybody got the same prompt, and however you curate that space to be what that is defined for you is your own interpretation of the prompt.
Should we take a look at a couple of the other images? I know you provided 2 additional ones.
Yeah. And so the last artist was
how differently people took it.
Yeah, the last artist was Sade, and if you could go back to it just really quickly. And Sade is a performance artist, and so a lot of when you see her final performance pieces, they are very ritualistic, and they're bringing in like with Ethiopian coffee or things from her culture, and I love her work, and to see kind of that inside of how she nurtures herself and how she nurtures her family and what's on her table was fascinating to me, and beautiful to see her. And her pieces are so intimate. They're very, very, very raw and very intimate. And I have loved that. The next artist that you were going to show is Maggie Pate. And her work, she uses food waste to dye materials. So her work literally started out with all of the ingredients that she was using that were so a lot of it was raw ingredients. And so I think she was making something with avocado and onions, and she was making something with blueberries. And so she had this kind of outdoor seating arrangement that would be seen in the other pictures, but you end up with the fibers that are from the food waste that she dyed as the final presentation of the meal. And I remember in that conversation with her, she was like, well, I don't know if I fit because I'm not, and I was like, what is your interpretation of your final product, and what you're really kind of giving to the public and giving to people that you nourish? And she talked about how she was nourished through the process of learning how to use these dyes, and how it's been a part of her reclaiming culture and her own personal identity. So we're seeing her fibers here, and as the final presentation of the meal, and it is definitely exquisite in ways that is quite interesting.
And it looks delicious, actually, surprisingly. It does sort of resemble foods in a way. It's really the composition is really incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
I
was
think that's one of the things that's. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Melani.
no, please.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things about this composition that I think initially tricked my eye was that it looks so much like just an overhead food shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways, like it's very easy to visually consume food since there's a million Instagram accounts that are all about just taking pictures of meals that maybe people enjoy. I don't know. That kind of lay flat aesthetic, I think, is played with in a really smart way here, because if you look at it just at a glance, it's like, oh, there might be some purple cabbage in the upper right hand corner, and maybe there's like some like shaved meats in the upper left. But then as you look closer, you realize, no, these are things that are made, but there's still more making to do with them. Like you can still use those fibers to create something else. It's not that final stage necessarily. Whereas I feel like, with a lot of the Instagram photography of the set table, like that is the moment that is perceived to matter. Whereas this is very much pointing to like there is still more time, there is still more of a relationship to cultivate with these materials.
I think that's what's really beautiful about this project is it's sort of like pulling the curtain back. I mean, Melania, you talk about this idea of we see this finished product typically with artists, but we don't necessarily see the time and the energy, the choices made, the intentionality in the creation of the work. And so you're doing this wonderful thing of like really pulling back this curtain so that we're seeing these moments of creation, not just the final product.
Yeah, and I when you look through the different artists, they all have a very different interpretation of what there's a wide range of what level of intimacy they were willing to present, and you see just these different layers, that is still far from how they often present with their final works. This artist is Lauren Vanderpool, and she is a raw and vegan chef. And I love that she showed the table as an altar, that and herself as someone that is on the altar, and that how we treat the sacred space of our own bodies and of what we're eating there. And so how there's all these healing elements, like she has the ankh, she has the crystal singing bowls, and as that are just as important as the food, and how we must also remember that the things that we put on the table are also things that we put on ourselves and in our bodies, and the healing part of that. And she does these beautiful food presentations, and so you see just her interpretation of the sacredness of that space that is so beautiful.
I have to ask Melani, this makes me think so much of our work at NMWA, the Josephine Baker quilt by Faith Ringgold with the banana skirt. And I'm wondering if the artist had was this a nod to Josephine Baker? Do you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's the other beautiful part that I loved about her work and some of the artist's work, is that when you look deep into like the backgrounds of their pictures and what's happening there, there's all of these nods, so there's to Josephine Baker, there's also to Queen Afua, there's also to different healers that have been a part of her community and that have defined healing for her and for other women. And so to be able to see how this shows up in the ingredients and in our pantry. And what's also been great working with my team, Amanda Vercruysse, she is associate curator, is also Grace DeWitt, and the research that they were able to provide. Amanda's able to come from this background of food history, which she did with the Smithsonian in their Food History Week, and just bringing so much knowledge about foodways and how culture has been moved around, and what people have done to survive and to survive and work within this culture. But then this period where people have also been reclaiming and says, no, we're not going to have the perfection salad that is just all white ingredients and trying to eliminate the parts of us that are feisty. We're going to look deeper into who we are and bring those those spices back into our kitchen and into our healing.
That's awesome. I know we want to bring Elissa back on so the two of you can talk because there's much love between you. I do want to ask really quickly though, Melani, how can our viewers actually be a participant of Reclamation?
Absolutely. So we have a two components of it that where viewers can participate. We're asking people to submit food recipes, remedies, and also food memories. So if you don't feel comfortable submitting a recipe, because sometimes I know my dad's barbecue sauce, I'm not submitting it, right? It's a top secret recipe. But on our website, you can still submit a food memory, and you can tag from our pantry. We have over 200 ingredients. This is supposed to go, it's going live November 15th, but it will be available to this audience today, and we'll put the link in the notes where you can start to submit. And we ask that you add a picture or two of family or even the food dish, and tell the story of how this recipe came to be, so that we could share that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. There's already a lot of excitement in the comments about the recipes and the memories and being able to join in. I mean, it's something that is such a vital connection to so many of us. But as promised, we're going to bring Elissa back on and
Awesome.
have a bigger conversation. So, all right, here we go. There we go.
Hi.
Hi again, Elissa.
Hi. This interface is
I'm
amazing.
so glad that we can have this little virtual reunion.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
And yeah, and you both talked about healing in a range of ways, specifically through art. Oh, hello.
Lonnie twin.
Yes.
I mean, human connection, that's what this is about. So I was wondering if you could maybe share, like, what are some of the moments that you look like, the artful moments in your everyday that sustain you? Because I think a lot of folks are looking for those means of either, being with art or making art, or just finding art in the everyday, and like how that can be a source of sustenance and healing and well-being.
We just saw one source, that little face. For me, my own kids and my friends' kids and community kids are an obvious source. And I think it's why I love working with people that are part of extended communities, whether it's their own children. When we were doing this piece, Brad's wife, who's also a midwife, was expecting as well. And so there was just lots of sort of birth energy around. And so you see that hand in the work. But for me, I joke all the time. There was this YouTube viral thing where a kid who had gotten in trouble and he said, I just wanted to do hood rat stuff with my friends. Do you remember that? I joke that that's my life mantra, is that I really just want to constantly work with my existing friends, potential future friends, new friends, and people that I really, love and like to be around. I don't know why not.
Yeah.
Oh, your sound is off, Melania.
Oh, Melani, I think we, not quite. I wonder why. Okay.
Oh, it was.
All right.
Wow.
We are extremely live, as Veronica says. I'd love to hear, actually, if anyone in our audience has specific questions for our artists and curators today, and even if they wanted to share a little bit more about how they've found healing in everyday activities, they can share that in the chat. That would be awesome too. Welcome back, Melani.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear us?
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
So sometimes I think that we forget like that art was really one of the first ways that we expressed, that it wasn't this separation, I mean, I think about maybe that first time that first woman, Dinkanesh, who, we know as quote unquote Lucy, like when she found like red berries and something that stained her skin, or, where was the expression there? And even in the day to day, like just playing, in our conversations, the banter that we have, or the arrangement of things. So how we've gotten to this place where art seems like something to aspire to, when and I think that's why it's so important to do the kind of projects that that we all are working on, is to show that no, it's in these very fine moments that the beauty is there, and the aesthetic is already there, and it's always been there, so that's really what's most important to me, like getting away from that gap between any hierarchy, this art over here, this person over there, this no, right here with in my small intimate spaces, how do I share what is already beautiful?
I think that's become really an important part of how we're living right now, because I think for a lot of people, going to those sort of quote unquote sacred spaces of museums is a source of comfort and healing for people. And yet we're at a point where it's not always comfortable for people to do that or possible. And so I think the really important reminder that the world around us is art. We are artists. We can sort of heal through our own creation, however small or large that is really important right now.
Yeah, I think
And
also
even just thinking about art as it's a mindset. It's that mindset of appreciation.
yeah, and I mean, and then I guess the converse of that is that sometimes museums are not a comfortable place. They often
Correct.
an
Yeah.
exclusionary space,
Yeah.
and so like looking at Melani's work,
Mm.
you know, I know those women and their work, but even them invoking people like Queen Afua, we evoke Queen Afua in at work. It levels that ground in terms of who's considered healer and who's considered artist, who's representing, who's all of that, who's the curator, in that formulation. And I do agree that sometimes all of that vocationing and hierarchying, I mean, part of that has been a deliberate attempt to keep those of us that are black or women or whatever out of the game. But it's also diminished what we could see, and now obviously that we can see work in public. We can see Wangechi in front of the Met. We can see Simone when we walk down the street. I think that's also a really important piece, is how, what are the publics and how we're bringing work to people and bringing people to work, is really important. And Melania, I love that you said play. We talk about this all the time, that musicians are afforded, like when they talk about making their work in public, it's called playing, and often that's my partner AJ always says this, that when people make film they use like war terms. It's not play, and that I do think that's what happens when sort of patriarchy enters the room, is that things start to be compartmentalized, and the modes start to look that way, whereas that's not how we work, it's not how we live. So
The collaborative. Oh, go ahead.
Elissa, I really like that you.
No, go ahead,
I was
please.
just gonna. Okay, thank you. One of the things, Elissa, that you mentioned is the idea of quotation, and how quotation can be something that makes art or art history more exclusive. And one of the things that I see both of your work kind of and your ethos doing is you're shifting what gets quoted. You're shifting sort of what gets entered into consideration and into a broader or a more visible history, perhaps, because it's not that it didn't exist, it's that it hasn't been presented. And that act of presentation, that act of thinking about who knows it and who doesn't know it, and how do we think about sharing the experience and the knowledge in a way that that centers the knower. And I think that that's something that's kind of really beautiful in both of your projects, that there are many ways of knowing, and that you're sort of allowing that to, or not even allowing, but like very deliberately prioritizing that kind of multiplicity of understandings coming through in what, you know, the final product or project looks like.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Even Melania, I mean, I would love to hear about your, like, the selection process, or the how you've come to people. Like, that's always exciting, you know. You know, 'cause it's always kind of a circular thing too, and we've seen it with the people who were doing the sanctioning before, but you know, women have a way of doing that as well. I'm curious about how you found people.
Yeah, some of the most of the women are people that I've looked at for a long time that I was like, if I ever have a way to work to work with them, or you know how sometimes you have in your circles, we both know some of the most brilliant people, like I mean just brilliant, but on the world, on a larger scale, it's like their voice is like a whisper. And I'm
Mhm.
like, if I ever get an opportunity to in any way amplify what's happening in that part of their world, I would love to. And then also, I wanted a wide variety. So like Sharena and Jossie DaCosta Johnson are both dancers, you know. Sharena, she's bringing more like a community, like people coming together. Jossie's just got her daughter Lawrence, it's herself. Maggie is traveling across the country, you know, and trying to figure out how to present food out of the back of her van, you know. And Alethea is in Korea, but we went to school together, and she did this amazing soul to soul project between the Black and Korean community in Baltimore. So everyone, and when I came to them, there was that moment of like, what are you doing? Like what? And I kind of like, you sure I fit, you know, like, and I'm like, yes, yes. And then including myself as artist, because I wanted them to also know, like, no, I'm seriously looking at you as curator as well, of like your space and how you frame it. Like I don't want I wanted something that just got rid of that as well, you know. And also the humility of like having to present something vulnerable. You know, sometimes as curators, we're like asking people to put this work out, and do we put ourselves out that way in that role, you know? And so I wanted to make sure I was putting myself out there and being difficult, having some difficult moments too. So but yeah, it's just the brilliance that you see, and you're like, wow, like how is it that this is not amplified, and finding a way to do that.
I want to thank you both for sort of expanding our understanding and expanding the definition of healer, of artist, of curator. I think it's meaningful to see people in different roles and sort of being, you know, given the space, as Melani says, sort of amplifying those voices in different ways. And I really love, Melani, that you say that even some of the artists were thinking, is this the right place for me? Is this the right space for me? But you're turning our sort of traditional museum space into a much more sort of wide and welcoming environment for people who wouldn't necessarily see themselves there, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Elissa, if I could. I love how you put in the funeral rites, and so how was it? So when because we both approach people that are not traditionally like presented this way,
Yeah.
what was that conversation to say to this person that I want you? Did you even tell them that they're going to be in an art project? I mean, what was
Yeah.
that for you?
You know, I mean, it's so funny. I was thinking about her because I'd met her partner, and you know, I moved here to Baltimore from New York, and her partner years ago said to me, Why would you leave?" You know, again, this is about reckoning with all of these things that have been considered sanctioned, and that includes cities or whatever. You know, I'm Black. I don't belong to any city in the U.S. So I was like, listen, I'm here to be with you. Like I'd never met him before, and he was like sort of taken aback. And for me, it's important for me to always be in Black spaces. I've never not lived in Black spaces, and I love all of the joy and pain connected with where I live and who I live with. Um, and so, Brad was raised in a funeral home, literally. So his art is deeply informed. The smell, the color, the love, all of the things that happen in those spaces, And this woman in particular, we'd worked with her and her child on As Told to God Thyself, which I assembled all of the people. That's a Kamasi Washington short form film that Brad and I also worked on together. And I'd assembled the humans that were in it. And that was amazing because it immersed me in all these like different cultural spaces within Baltimore that I thought I already knew. And you don't. So, I just understood the reverence. And she's also this aesthetically incredible person. She just moves in the world with a lot of like fire. And I kept imagining how comforting it must be when someone passes on to come to her first, because I feel comforted in her presence. So when we talked to her about it, she was like, oh, yeah, the same sort of thing, taken aback. But she was also, I don't think they understood that they would be like several stories high, represented in that way. But we shot this in Brad's house with, his kids running around in a very, so it was really easy to get people involved because it was almost like come over and be a part of something. And it also is going to be, on film. We shot it on actual 16 millimeter, that stuff. So, there's conversation around the process and the camera and that sort of thing. But I think she's someone who, like you said, is a whisper. People have no understanding of how impactful that role is. It's as impactful as the people who bring people into the world. And, she sends us on to the next. So, but I think she knows, the community has conferred it onto her for her whole life, So in some ways she was like taken aback, but she was also like, oh yeah, of course, these are my people, like, healers and artists. Like I'm an artist. I do that, So yeah, it was nice, Yeah, I mean the whole process again, like I said, it's very connected to being with people.
I agree.
And kind of taking that note of being with people, we actually have a question from a viewer, Lilia Biso, who asks, how do we find our artist circles? And I think, since you both have these really expansive views of the way that you find people, do you have any suggestions on like, how do you find your circle or make it?
I think starting with just expanding your idea of who is an artist, that's a great place to start. And also expanding your idea of what you do that's actually your practice. So when I became a mother and I was in grad school for curatorial practice, I was like, oh no, I'm going to do curatorial practice because I got accepted to photography. But I was clear like this motherhood piece. Oh, I'm curating something. This is a practice, like, and so and opening up, like, but that opened me up to other mother circles and seeing my friends and the men in my life in a different way and how they were supportive. And so really seeing like the creativity that people bring to help you solve your problems is an art practice. And then you're surprised, on how like one of our artists, Wanda Ramuji, I met her from going to art on the vineyard and so sometimes just attending and hearing what other people have to say. But our connection really was about that we have two kids running around, throwing socks up on top of fans. And so so now we're doing this art practice together that really started rooted in just laughing about the day-to-day, motherhood piece and being an artist. So it doesn't always happen directly. It doesn't always happen like, oh, you're an artist, let's connect. It happens because, oh, you're living in a way that parallels or like, is a paradox to my own life. And we end up staying connected through that.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. You're living through what you eat and what you share with people, and you find a good person. Why not figure out what collaboration could look like, together, because you're already collaborating on life, right?
Mm.
I was thinking about even like Melani. When I first came to Baltimore, it was because the chair of her department, I found material and it was so incredible, it was so beautiful, and then understanding his philosophy about doing something different. I was still in New York teaching at Pratt, and I was like, this is art. The way he's trying to create a whole different kind of pedagogy.
Mm.
And I just called him, and he was in New York, and we talked, and then when I came there, I was like, anything that flows from this has got to be great, which is for his students. And I remember seeing Melani's name and it had two S's, and I was like, oh, like Frederick Douglass? And she was like, yeah. And, astounded by that, like that circle. And, I just, like, for me, when I find people like her and work like this, I just figure out how to be in community with it, like you said, one way or the other, supporting it, or figuring out how to make things. And collaboration, again, can be, pre-COVID, can be a dinner. It can be, just showing up for each other's work. And then eventually I feel like those things flow into pretty intense collaborations. I mean, the reason I met Brad was one of my closest friends, Rashida Bumbray, who's an incredible thinker, artist, and curator as well, a polymath. And I worked on a project in Brooklyn, and that project came together. It was first with Creative Time, but they came to Rashida, and this is to Melani's point about platforming, and those whispers. And she said, "Well, I'm not doing something in Brooklyn without Elissa Blount-Moorhead," which I was like, "What?" Rashida, she could do anything without anybody. But she felt like I was essential because of those whispers and the work that we did that may or may not have been visible in other planes. And then that led to other things. And then in doing that, we were sort of presented with people and work that was already sanctioned in a lot of big spaces. And we said, but have you heard of Zenobia Bailey and Simone Lee and Bradford Young? Like, I know, and this was to NATO's credit and Creative Times credit, they were like, oh, okay, we know, like, so I think platforming, and I think if you have platforms, and then if you don't, connecting with people who are trying to figure out how to create new ones or create new spaces where they don't exist, um, is I feel like this is a moment. Like, there is a moment where that's possible. I'm getting calls that I didn't get before,
Yeah.
and not just to fit into that box, but really to say, oh, sorry, I didn't see the world created, you know, and we're making worlds that we want to live in. So I think that, to the person who wrote in, that's the biggest thing, is like, you're already in a community. So we should be able to come to your community and see what you're doing and be a part of what you're doing. Or at the very least, just make stuff with each other for yourself to enjoy. I mean, that's what I do, and then sometimes it spills into the street, and other people want to see it.
Right. That happens a lot.
Yeah, it's cool. That's great.
So
To me,
I
that
thank you both for joining us today.
I just wanted to say something really quick. Marissa Benson, she said, what are the challenges you're encountering in collaborations and the ways that equity can be ensured? I think this conversation ties into it. Like, if you are in a space where you can amplify a voice, then do that. If you are at an institution where you can make decisions about how projects are happening, how money is spent, be open, be more broad about the way you do it, be more broad about the way you can include it. And then also accept the challenge of the moment. I think that this project that I'm working on strangely is possible because of the pandemic and because the ways we're forced to be more accessible, the ways that we're forced to expand online platforms. So who are you bringing to the table to like solve your problems? If you're always bringing the people that either created the problem or who are always solving the problem, it's not going to really get to any equity. And there's not going to be real partnership that reaches in communities beyond the one you already have. So just expanding the way we work, and also what we listen to, sometimes change the channel, and you'd be surprised at what, shifting down a few dials and seeing what's happening in other spaces can do, not only for the work you're promoting, but for your own practice. Like your amplification of another voice actually improves your practice because you're learning. Like you need it just as much. Like the institution needs this challenge just as much as the person who's challenged by the challenge, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to.
So,
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
we don't have any seconds. I know we go, right? But that's,
I mean, this is.
I just 2 seconds because what Ron was saying is like,
Elissa.
it's super revolutionary what she's saying, but it's not hard. And I would say, Marissa, to look at the practice. I'm sorry to keep bringing her up, but I love her so much. Look at the practice of Simone Lee, because this project that I mentioned, Funk God Jazz in particular, that was a project where we ostensibly would have curated it like curators have curated things, right? You bring in an artist and you showcase their work. But when we brought in Simone, she then turned her platform or opportunity into an opportunity for many. And that was the ultimate inspiration in terms of how you can do that. So, how you can kind of derail the process a bit. So that, and also similarly, Simone got a residency at New Museum, and we did a project called Black Women Artists for Black Lives Matter. And I thought, again, I couldn't be more inspired. And that was something where she took something that was given to her and literally handed it over to us and 100 women without concerns around control and curatorial ideas and framing and any of that stuff. I mean, it's the most vulnerable you could probably be with something that was supposed to be this sort of institutional, sort of elite position. So yes, that is about, having some power and then turning it on its head, but it's also, something where everyone is really winning. I mean, who they were introduced to in that moment, it's an incredible group of people. So, I would say, Marissa, look at those different kinds of projects where you've seen people do that bait and switch, and change the channel, to use Melani's words. It's incredible work, and it's very doable.
I think thank you, Elissa. I think there's really exciting work happening right now because of our sort of the distance we have and sort of the isolation we have. And I feel like there's been a meta moment for me here. I want to thank you both again so much for your time and your extra time and your conversation. And then I look at Veronica, and we wouldn't probably be doing this live program between two institutions about an hour apart if not for our current circumstances and the missions and visions of both of our institutions. So I just want to say thank you both for the work you do, for encouraging people to be artists and curators and amplifiers and collaborators. And I hope everyone will join us. We are going to continue our series. Next month is, what's our topic? It's about America. So we are looking forward to having a new conversation, and we'll be doing this for a while, hopefully.
Yes, so
thank you all
for widening the circle.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
And for being in community with us for the moment.
Yeah. Have a wonderful day,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Call me Melani.
I will. Very soon.